أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا والشفيع نفوسنا بالقاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين اللهم صل وسلم على محمد وآل محمد. For today's discussion, inshallah, since we wrapped up last week, my apologies, I wasn't here in person, I was not feeling well. We finished up our series entitled The Eye and Spirituality, where we define the soul and different factors to consider in terms of cultivation of the soul. And last week we concluded with a couple of sort of practical things, tangible things that we can do in order to allow for growth of the soul. But that since today we're approaching the end of the semester and finals, to speak to a really lengthy, or a portion of a very lengthy, but very as well beautiful tradition, a hadith, a conversation from Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib, between Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam to his companion Kumail ibn Ziyad. To give a little bit of context, first of all, Ali, of course, like we know, the successor to prophetic knowledge and divine wisdom, is in the company of his companion and close confidant, Kumail ibn Ziyad. Of course, the same Kumail who narrates Dua Kumail, the supplication that we recite on Thursday nights in Shi'i tradition. But in addition to that, Kumail was exposed to a lot of very sacred teachings, so to say, of Imam Ali alayhi salam. One of these important conversations that he narrates is this, which I want to speak to this evening, a virtual long sort of piece of advice that Ali alayhi salam offers to Kumail, and I'll read to you the context of the narration, and then we'll go through a couple of lines. It states, قال Kumail ibn Ziyad. Kumail one day he states, and this is narrated in Nahj al-Balagha, but also in the Amali of Sheikh al-Mufid. He states, قال Kumail ibn Ziyad أخذ بيدي أمير المؤمنين علي بن أبي طالب عليه السلام فأخرجني إلى الجبان فلما أسهر تنفس السعادة. He says that one day, Kumail, he says that one day I was, perhaps it was, according to a different report, it was after the time of Isha prayers, so it was at night. And he says that I was taken by the hand of Imam Ali alayhi salam took me by the hand. And we left the graveyard to walk into the middle of a desert. فَلَمَّا أَسْحَرَ تَنَفَّسَ السَّعَدَى. And when we entered into this desert, the Imam alayhi salam, he let out a really long sigh. And again, just to give a little bit of context, the detail is important in understanding sort of what the Imam alayhi salam, what Ali ibn Abi Talib was going through at this moment, most likely. Tanaffas as-sa'ada. It says that he let out this really long, sort of depressing, breath. And then he stated, ثم قال يا كميل بن زياد إن هذه القلوب أوعية فخيرها أوعاها. He states, oh, Kumail, listen to what I got to say. Surely these hearts are receptive. Surely these hearts are receptive. فَخَيْرُهَا أَوْعَاهَا. And the best of these hearts are the most receptive ones. So remember a couple of important points. Or these hearts are containers, and the best of those are the biggest containers, or the most receptive containers, so to say. To give a little bit of context from our series when we're talking about the heart and the soul and spirituality and so on, it's important to keep in mind that whenever the Imam alayhi salam, he speaks, or the Qur'an or the traditions of the Prophet and his family more broadly, when they speak to the reality of the heart, they're not talking again about a physical organ, they're talking about a spiritual vessel that has ability, that has potential, that is not something tangible, that is something in the celestial realm that we have the opportunity to perfect, that we have the opportunity to cleanse. In a hadith from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He states, "Al-qalb haram Allah, fala taskun fi haram Allah ghayr Allah." That the heart is the sanctuary of God, so don't allow for anything to enter into it except for God. So over here he states, surely these hearts are this container. They are this sort of, they are receptive. They have the ability to intake things. And the best of those is that which can take more. Doesn't mean take more, sugary foods or that which has more cholesterol. Again, we're talking on a spiritual level. So the best of those is that which has the ability to bear hardships and difficulties. The best of that is which feels more motivation and inspiration to engage in dua or in supplication or in recitation of the Qur'an or in prayers or so on and so forth. فَاحْفَظْ عَنِّي مَا أَقُولُ لَكَ. Now he says, now pay attention and preserve what I'm about to tell you. He's given him some advice. الناس ثلاثة. That people are of three types, he states. فعالم رباني ومتعلم على سبيل النجاة وحمج رعاء أتباع كل نائق يميلون مع كل ريح. The Imam alayhi salam continues. And he states that people are of three types. The first group of people are the learned, scholars. But not any type. He doesn't say alim, someone who's knowledgeable. It is alimun rabbani. Someone who is knowledgeable but also has piety. Someone who's knowledgeable but it connects that knowledge to God. Number two, muta'allim ala sabil al-najat. Number two, the second group of people, if you're not learned yourself, if you don't have that relationship, then you're part of the second group of people. Hopefully we're at the very least these type of people, the students on the path to salvation. You're seeking something, you want something, and you'll learn it from those more knowledgeable. And then he states in the third group of people is the riffraff of society, so to say. Following the sound of the crows, meaning that they follow everybody. Doesn't matter, that they're not concerned about the bigger picture. They bend as the wind blows. Yamiluna ma'a kulli rih. Sounds pretty mean almost from the Imam alayhi salam, but he's speaking with words of a little bit of aggression because he's trying to demonstrate something. Yes.
Could you explain more about students in the path to salvation?
Yes, we're going to get there, inshallah. Yeah. لم يستضيئوا بنور العلم. These type of people, group number three, they're not affected by their hearts are not illuminated by the light of knowledge. وَلَمْ يَلْجَأُوا إِلَى رُكْنٍ وَثِيقٍ. And they can't find something strong to support them. They don't, there's I guess a challenge that people often face where they don't necessarily believe in anything. You ask them what they believe in, I don't know. Who cares? You ask them, what's your purpose in the world? I'll figure it out. I don't know. Why are you asking me this question? I'm talking about, this world is temporary. And if we don't know where we're going, where we're seeking, what we're here for, and even if you don't know, if you're not even striving to know that answer, like, I don't know what's important. Sometimes I think that I like to talk about these things so much, maybe because I'm just weird, right? But then I wonder, how come no one else cares? I said, but then why am I concerned with other people? I'm concerned with myself. I'm here for a short period of time. Might as well know why I'm here. So we continue. We're going to get to your question, inshallah. He says, Ya Kumail, O Kumail. Remember he said before, فَاحْفَظْ عَنِّي مَا أَقُولُ لَكَ. Pay attention to what I'm saying. So he separates and he mentions these three groups of people. Then he continues. Then he states, Ya Kumail. This is also good because you guys are at the end of the semester and exams are coming up and you wonder why you do all this. Ya Kumail, العلم خير من المال. Knowledge is better than wealth. Why are people so concerned with wealth? العلم يحرسك وأنت تحرس المال. Very nice line. He states knowledge is that which protects you. Knowledge protects you while you protect wealth. We're so concerned gathering together our money, where it's going, where it's coming, where you're keeping it. We are protecting it while knowledge is that which protects you. والمال تنقصه النفقة والعلم يزكو عن الإنفاق. With wealth, the minute that you buy something, you lose that money, right? You don't get it back. If you buy something as small or as simple as a cup of coffee, or if you buy a home, you're not going to get that money back. It's gone. While when you utilize knowledge, your knowledge increases, right? When you know something and you teach it to somebody, that's the best way to increase your knowledge, actually. Even in the Islamic seminary, we're taught that once you study a book, study a particular classical text, the best way to making sure that you really understand it is get together a group of younger students and teach it to them, because it helps you formulate your thoughts. And as one of my friends, he always says, he says that if you can't explain a concept to somebody else, if sometimes you're trying to explain something to somebody that you read about or that you heard about, and you're having a hard time and you say, like, I just can't explain it. My friend would always say, if you can't explain it, it means you don't understand it well enough. Whether it's true or not, wallahu alam, it sounds like it makes sense. وَالْعِلْمُ يَزْكُو عَنِ الْإِنفَاقِ. Knowledge that you practice, knowledge that you teach, knowledge that you share, it increases only. وَسَنِيءُ الْمَالِ يَزُولُ بِزَوَالَ. And the utilization of your wealth, it disappears the minute that you utilize it. يا كمال بن زياد معرفة العلم دين يدان به ويكسب الإنسان الطاعة في حياته. Continues. He says that, O Kumail, the best way to entrench faith in God, the best way to practice your religion is by increasing your knowledge. Remember what we talked about, though, some weeks ago? What type of knowledge, right? Not the knowledge of things that are not significant or not important. If you remember, we gave the example of when the Prophet ﷺ, he exits his house and there's a guy mentioning sort of the genealogy of everyone else. And the Prophet ﷺ, why are you taking knowledge from him? That's good information, no worries. The true knowledge, the knowledge that we're talking about over here, is the knowledge of God, the knowledge of your purpose, the knowledge of your existence. So he states that the best way to practice your religion is by increasing your knowledge, for it enables us to be obedient to God during our lifetime and to be praiseworthy after we die. يكسب الإنسان الطاعة في حياته. In this world, we know our responsibility. Once you know God, once you know yourself, you know what you're living for. وجميل الأحدوثة بعد وفاته. And you will be praised, and you have a legacy after you die for the one who's knowledgeable, because you share that, right? We're taught in our traditions that when you share knowledge, just like when you share wealth, that your legacy continues via that which you gave in charity, virtually. Charity of wealth is one. Charity of knowledge is something greater, because it's a gift that also keeps on giving. You teach your children teach their children teach their children, they teach their friends and their community members, and everyone who's impacted by the knowledge that you impart, you reap that reward in the world beyond this one as well. وَالْعِلْمُ حَاكِمٌ وَالْمَالُ مَحْكُومٌ عَلَيْهِ. He states that knowledge leads. Knowledge is the authority, while wealth is that which we try to protect with our own authority. يا كمال بن زياد خزان الأموال هلك خزان الأموال وهم أحياء والعلماء باقون ما بقي الدهر أعيانهم مفقودة وأمثالهم في قلوب موجودة. He says, O Kumail, the people who have hoarded wealth, they've died, even though their wealth might be remaining. While those who are learned, they exist forever. Though their bodies have disappeared, their teachings and their wisdom and the knowledge that they share, it lasts forever. Till now, somebody just sent me a book I just saw in the office right now, a book on sort of the classics, so to say, in the sort of Greco-Roman world, about the importance of studying Socrates. True. Till now, in academies all across the world, we still study a 2nd century text. It's crazy. Till now, from the successor to the Prophet of God, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in gatherings all across the world, we recollect Ali ibn Abi Talib and for his knowledge and for that which he imparted. When you contribute toward community, society, that which is meaningful, it's something that lasts forever, undoubtedly. يا كميل إنها هنا لعلما جمعا وأشار بيده إلى صدره لو أسبحت له حملا بلا أسبت لقنا غير مأمون عليه. Okay, what does the Imam alayhi salam say? So he's talking over here, just to put a little bit of context now, right? He begins to speak to the merits of knowledge and so on and so forth. And then, how did we say that he started the conversation? He took Kumail by the hand and he let out the sigh, right? Meaning that something was bothering him. So he goes like on this rant about the importance of seeking knowledge, about, basically, if you can contextualize it a little bit, then nobody, everyone's concerned with wealth, everyone's concerned with money, everyone's concerned with their lives, everyone's concerned with their businesses, everyone's concerned with everything else except for what he feels or what he's trying to demonstrate is the most important. And then he says, and oh, Kumail, listen to what I gotta say. Look over here. He said, over here lies the knowledge, lies true knowledge, that which I have learned from the Prophet of God, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then he states, over here, I have the knowledge of the heavens and I have the knowledge of the earth as I learned from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And I wish that I had people who cared. I wish that I had people who listened. He says, because if I had it, I would have shared it with them, meaning that people are not concerned with these things. Again, going back to the point that we mentioned before. Going back to the earlier point that Rafi, you had mentioned, because the sermon is very lengthy. When we go back to these 3 groups of people that he mentions, again, he says that there are 3 groups of people. The first group are the learned, of course, those who have who utilize their knowledge in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The second are those students on the path to salvation, muta'allim ala sabil al-najat. And then the third are those who are not concerned. There's a couple of different commentaries to exactly how we define these 3 groups of people. Some would say that it's contextual, right, to that particular time period, that Ali alayhi salam was speaking toward, the people that he was dealing with at that time. Meaning that, I am the learned, right? Ali is saying, maybe I'm the learned. Kumail, like you are the one of those who listen to what I have to say, so you're on that path to salvation. And number 3 is everybody else who does completely no concern. I would say more broadly that if we were to sort of take benefit from it, when he says alimun rabbani, it's anyone who is from the awliya of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Anyone who understands who understands the religion via teachings of the Qur'an and of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Number 2, students on the path of salvation, متعلم على سبيل النجاة, anyone who seeks toward understanding what their role and what their responsibility is, not limited in any particular way. Literally, he says, متعلم على سبيل النجاة, they're seeking salvation. When we talk about how we define salvation within the Qur'an even, we literally talk about anyone who strives toward finding truth, finding absolute truth. I'll give you an example. We have a principle, it is very rational in usul al-fiqh, but we also translate it in ilm al-aqaid, meaning in sort of theology or in kalam. It's called قبح العقاب بلا بيان. It's a little bit of a technical term, but don't worry about it. Maybe by meaning, it's going to make a little bit more sense. We believe, right, that God is the all-just. And we believe that God is the all-merciful. Is it fair, or is it just, or is it merciful for God to punish me for something that I didn't know? Let's say I had absolutely no idea. We as Muslims, more broadly, we had absolutely no idea that pizza is haram, for instance. Right? Let's just say, for example, pizza is haram. Or maybe something more relevant because someone says, no, I don't know, they don't eat pizza. Or coffee, everybody loves coffee. I love coffee. Okay, and if you don't, I feel bad for you. Let's say coffee is haram for whatever reason. Let's just say in the world, we didn't have the sort of evidence to find out that there was actually a substance that was impermissible according to Islamic law. How many Muslims drink coffee? A lot, right? Maybe every single human being in the world drinks coffee. Okay. Is it fair for on Judgment Day, after we die, God raises all of humanity, gathers together everyone, and says, oh, you people who drank coffee, you committed an act that is forbidden, I'm sending you all to hell. Is that fair or no? Why? We literally transgressed God's law. Coffee was haram. So can he send us to hell or no?
No,
Why?
because like we're only reliant on our own knowledge, so like we're only accountable for that, right?
Yeah. And also, just even rationally, how could God do that? That's just it's unjust, right? And we believe that God is the all just. It is not merciful, it's not graceful, it's none of the perceptions that we have of God. So how could he do something like that? It does not make any sense. So we utilize this principle in matters of Islamic law, okay? To state that there is no way that a good God could do bad to his servant, to the creation, if he did not explain it to us and say that it was forbidden. Make sense? Okay. How do we translate this to sort of our understanding of our belief system and our responsibilities in this world? Let's say, and obviously things are a little bit less dictated, right? With Islamic law, we have, the Qur'an, we have the Hadith literature, we have sort of, deductions that are made, ijtihad that is performed in terms of us allowing to sort of reach whether something is permissible versus impermissible, so on and so forth. Anyhow, when it comes to matters of theology, let's say that, someone in the middle of, I don't know, anywhere in the world, they strove to understand sort of the nature of God or to understand sort of their responsibility in the world. They didn't have access to the Islamic Center at New York University. They didn't have access to, teachers. Their parents didn't know or weren't concerned about religion. These questions never sort of occurred to them sort of in their upbringing, so they weren't part of any particular community. But they realized that this world is not just about accumulation of wealth and getting a good job and then getting married and buying a home and having children and then leaving all their wealth for inheritance to their children and then dying, and then that's it. They realized there's something more to the world, but they couldn't figure it out. And they strove every single day to find the answers to those questions about what am I supposed to do in this world. But they never got answers to those questions. And they died on the path toward seeking this answer. Could God punish them? Would God hold them to account and be like, what's wrong with you? How did you not know that you should have followed a
Well-
God and prophets and whatever, like we believe?
Well, you can hold them to account just based on what they were exposed to and what they knew. It's like saying, for example, like a family in like the north of Greenland who all they know is like snow and like fishing and like fur coats and whatnot, and like whatever traditions that have been passed on like from generation to generation, but have had like no exposure to like religion or monotheism whatsoever. Like you can't judge someone like that or a group of people like that on the same basis.
Of course not.
Someone has had the same like exposure,
Yeah.
like a different exposure. I mean,
But because that individual, maybe this individual in the north of Greenland, for instance, has been seeking toward finding the answer to that question, isn't that something praiseworthy? Right?
yeah,
Is that fair to say or no?
yeah.
Right? They meet somebody's, at least they realize that there's a bigger question, and they made the effort. And they made that effort toward finding those questions, finding answers to those sort of innate existential questions, like we like to say, is what it means to be muta'allim ala sabil al-najah, to be the student on the path towards salvation. Because at the end of the day, even if I had my entire religion wrong, if we are all wrong about this, something, Rafi, you probably know better, was Pascal's wager.
What?
There's like a famous philosopher or something like that who says that, I think it's called Pascal's wager. Look it up, if I'm not mistaken, when you get a moment. Basically, this guy, you familiar with it?
I've like heard of it.
You heard
but
the phrase?
I don't really remember.
Okay, if I'm not mistaken, this guy, this philosopher, if I'm not mistaken, his name is Pascal. I could very well be wrong about the name, who says that there are two different sort of approaches you can take. One is that you live your life, right? Do the best that you can, and you deal with it. But
Oh, yeah.
right, but
I've thought about this before.
yeah. Or on the flip side, there is, you live your life and you practice sort of the faith. You believe in a God, because even if there is no God, at least I'm taking the wager and say that if there is one, and there is an afterlife, then at least I'll get paradise. In fact, a guy, he comes to Imam Jaffer as-Sadiq alayhi salam one day, and he says, "Oh grandson, or oh Jaffer, like how do you know that your religion is the truth?" In fact, he was famous for sort of debating a lot of people who just completely neglected and rejected God, and in Medina and so on. And this particular guy used to always come to Imam Jaffer and give him a hard time. So one day, in order to respond to him, he tells him, he's like, you know what? Maybe you're right. Maybe there's no God, there's no heaven, there's no hell, there's no afterlife, there's nothing. He said, why are you bothering me about what I believe though? Right? He said, because if you're wrong, if you're right, we're both, we both die, we both enter into nothingness. And at the very least, I wasted a couple of minutes in my day in meditating, right? In our language, he didn't actually say that. He's like, I pray, I fasted during the month of Ramadan, whatever, it made me feel good in this world. He said, if you're right, then we both go to the same place. But if you're wrong and I'm right, and there is a God and there is an afterlife, you enter into, divine inferno, right? And I enter into divine paradise. So isn't eternal paradise worth taking the wager, so to say, taking the bet that there is a world beyond this one? This is sort of very polemical,
Yeah.
right? But this is just the way that he responds, and it's known as Pascal's wager, I guess, in sort of Western philosophy and whatnot. Anyhow, what I'm trying to say is, or what the Imam alayhi salam is mentioning over here, is that be one of these first two groups of people. Ask yourself those questions and realize sort of the merit of knowledge as an opportunity for us to potentially be or seek answers to those sort of deep existential questions. And then, as the Imam alayhi salam says in this line, he says, over here, I have that knowledge. Come and take from me. Come and learn from me. Recite the Qur'an. Read the ahadith of the Prophet. Read the ahadith of Ali alayhi salam and his family. He says, but there's nobody who wants to take my knowledge. Nobody. مستعملا آلة الدين للدنيا ومستظهرا بنعم الله على عباده. And he continues, without getting into detail. Again, the idea is that keep in mind that every day and every opportunity and every experience is meant to be sort of another stepping stone in this path toward increasing our knowledge of all things. As the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he would always make a dua after the Isha prayers. According to the hadith, he would state, "Oh Allah, show me things the way they really are. Show me things the way they really are. Show me the truth behind all of this. Show me the purpose behind all of this." Imam Zainul Abidin, alayhi salam, fourth Imam, he would go into the state of prostration also after Isha prayers, but maybe symbolic for before he would go to sleep or something like that. And he would say, "Oh Allah, increase me in my certainty." And it is said that one day a group of his companions, they would hear him, sort of uttering these lines. They say, like, "You are Ali ibn Hussein, like, how are you already not certain in God?" And he responded, he stated that certainty has 10 levels, and every level has 10 levels, and every level of those has 10 levels, meaning that there's always an opportunity for more growth, for more knowledge, for more realization again of the reality of this world that we live in. Yes.
I agree with that, but like, doesn't that also mean that the first group and the second group of people are interchangeable? So even if you're knowledgeable and pious, couldn't you also be like a student of the path of salvation, because there's always more to learn and always,
Of course.
like, I mean, just because you're knowledgeable doesn't mean that you're going to stop right there and say, okay, I'm knowledgeable and I believe in God, like this is it. Like,
Of course, lifelong journey.
Yeah.
They probably always are shifting between stage 2 and 1, and consistently you feed the dough, like we like to say, sort of circular process of continuing growth. Again, like the way that it could be understood as well is, if we read it in the first way, is that Alamun Rabbani is specific toward the sort of infallible personalities, right? Meaning the prophets and the Imams of Ahlul Bayt, and that's it. There's nobody else. Everyone else falls into group number 2. But like we know, even in that group, there's also an opportunity for more growth, right? But in what realm, God knows, right? We don't know. We don't know when they mention certainty, like where is ours? Where is ours and where is theirs? Wallahu alam. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Muhammadin wa alihi at-tayyibin at-tahirin.